Shalom, shalom, giving honor and praise to the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. We call this one here the matter of 1619 in Genesis chapter 15. It's 10 slides, but we just want to emphasize on a point. Introduction, giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. This presentation is brought to you by Mordeh Yeshaya and Old Testament Hebrew Israelites. Giving due respect to the teachers I had, Mori Yosef, Cohen Larry, Simeon, Mori Hosea. May they all rest in peace. I can be contacted at 908-587-4841. Forward. This is presented to you in love, is what I first want to state. The point in this presentation is to set the record straight regarding what happened with the Israelites in Egypt and the claim that is made today regarding 2019 being our year to leave this Western Hemisphere. Disclaimer, I am not a prophet. However, we cannot take the 400 years mentioned in Genesis 15 and say 2019 is the year for us to be released from captivity or exile in the Western Hemisphere, since our captivity in the Western Hemisphere was before the era of the 17th century, that is to say before the 1600s. To say the black people brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619 is the beginning of our captivity and enslavement in the Western Hemisphere defies the fact that they were brought to Jamestown, were there who were shipped from Brazil. The people brought to Jamestown in 1619 were already enslaved prior to being in Jamestown. They were already enslaved in Brazil. Next slide. Genesis chapter 15, verse 13 to 16. And he said unto Abram that is, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come hither again. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Genesis chapter 39, verse 1 through 4. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him at the hands of the Ishmaelites, who, it says, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. So we see Joseph was already a captive in a land that's not his, and he's a descendant of Abraham. Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 through verse 14. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came by the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, and let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass, that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pitom Ramses, and it says, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage and mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them to serve was with rigor. So the Israelites were made to serve with rigor in a land that's not theirs. See, and this is after the timing of Joseph. So the 400 years that we're talking about did not start with the era that you see in Exodus, but more so in the era that you see in Genesis. Next slide. Exodus chapter 6, verse 14 to verse 25. These are the heads of their father's houses, the son of Reuben, the firstborn in Israel, Hanoach and Palu and Hezron and Carmi. These are the families of Reuben. And the sons of Shimon, Yemuel and Yamin and Ohad and Yakin and Zohar and Shaul, the son of a Canaanitish woman. These are the families of Shimon. And these are the names of the sons of Lewi, according to their generations, Gershon and Kohat and Merari. And the years of the life of Lewi were 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni, and Shimei, according to their families. And the sons of Kohat, Amram, and Ishar, and Hebron, and Uziel. These and the years of the life of Kohat were 133 years. And the sons of Merari, Machli, and Mushi. These are the families of Levi according to their generations. And Amram took him Jochebed, his father's sister, to wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And the years of the life of Amram were 137 years. And the sons of Ishar, Koar, Nepheg, and Zikri. And the sons of Uziel, Mishael, and Elzaphan, and Zitri. And Aaron took him Elisheba, the daughter of Aminadab, sister of Nachshon, to wife. And she bore him Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Itamar. And the sons of Korah, Asir, and Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These are the families of the Kothites. And Eleazar, Aaron's son, took him one of the daughters of Putiel to wife, and she bore him Pinchas. These are the heads of the fathers of the Levites according to their families. What am I pointing out and reading that? Is because when you look at Joseph and Levi were the same generation. So after Levi, all right, you had Kohath. After Kohath, you have Amram, and after Amram, you have Moses. So that's the 4 generations that Genesis chapter 15 is talking about. So when it says in the 4th generation it will come back, it's talking about 4 generations after the era of what happened with Joseph and his situation, because that started off the enslavement inside of a land that's not theirs. They will be made to serve a people that's not theirs and the land that's not theirs. That started not in Exodus, that started in Genesis with Joseph. So he being the same generation as Levi, you got 4 generations later under Moses, they're led back into the land of Canaan. So that's why it's important to study upon reference purposes. A history of the American people in the 1440s, exploring the African coast. From their newly acquired lands, the Portuguese rediscovered slavery as a working commercial institution. The Portuguese entered the slave trade in the mid-15th century, took it over, and, in the process, transformed it into something more impersonal and horrible than it had been either in antiquity or in medieval Africa. When the trade was in its infancy, several hundred slaves were shipped to Lisbon. As the sugar industry expanded, slaves began to be numbered in thousands. By 1550 AD or CE, okay, some 50,000 African slaves had been imported into San Tome alone, which likewise became a slave port and Tripat. So this is something we just want to get into for edification purposes. So you see that date right there? 1550. That's before 1619. All right, next slide. The Slave Trade by Hugh Thomas. In 1619, John Wolfe, the Norfolk-born first recorder of Virginia, already a grower of tobacco, noted, about the last of August came a Dutch man of war that sold us 20 Negroes. This statement is usually held to be the first reference to the import of black slaves into what became the United States, though Panfilo de Narvaez, Menendez de Avila, and Coronado all had taken slaves with them in their expeditions of conquest in Florida and New Mexico the previous century. So these 3 individuals had already been involved in the transport of black people as slaves in the 1500s. Now, they may have not been named the United States, but it was in an area where became later known as the United States in the 1500s. You had those guys mentioned there trading black people off as slaves. So the 1619 is counted in most cases, perhaps, because that was 12 years after it became a colony. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Black Cargoes, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade. It's a book online you may want to get, as well as the book that you see here, Deuteronomy 28:15-68. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High.